Here's another quote for you to consider. This one comes from Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti is, one of these modern spiritual teachers, actually non-dual teachers, who points at life from a place of no mind. So he's been going through his own process of ego dissolution and has come to see life from this unified, non-dual place. This is a process he describes in his book, in his journals actually. I think it's the Journals of Krishnamurti. And there he describes his process of dissolution. But then he has many talks on YouTube and many books as well. One of the books I recently read was Beyond the Unknown or something like that. I forget the name specifically. So anyway, I'm going to share a quote in this video, but I'm trying to explain a bit where is he coming from. So he's coming from a view of reality that is not mentally influenced. So it's not coming from the mind, he's coming from the flow, from the whole. And the way he speaks about life makes no sense to most people because it's so confusing. We're generally used to see life from the perspective, from the viewpoint of the mind that is in charge, that is trying to control things. And actually the mind is very insecure, it's very conditioned, feels a lot of pressure, and is always looking for security in money, in relationships, in productivity, in everything. So the mind is actually what suffering is. It's this subjective perspective of I am separate from life, and therefore, because I'm separate, I'm insecure, I feel isolated, I feel vulnerable, and therefore I'm insecure and I need to seek security. And what I call happiness, egoic happiness, is actually just security. Like if I make more money, then I'm happy. Actually, I'm just more secure because money is security. If I have people like me and people's validation, then I'm happy. But actually, egoically speaking, it just means I'm secure because if people like me, they will not hurt me. They will help me. So therefore, I can survive. I can exist. So, the mind is constantly seeking for security in this sense. And a lot of these mystics, people like Osho that I shared in a previous video, or Krishnamurti, or Eckhart Tolle, you could say these days, or Byron Katie, which is a beautiful mystic as well. You don't see that so much in her YouTube videos where she's doing the work with people, but you see that in her books. You can find her books on Audible or other places. And she's describing in her books this mystical perspective on life. Just to mention a few books from her, actually probably one of my favorite books ever is the one from Byron Katie that's called 1,000 Names for Joy. And she has another book, A Mind at Home with Itself. But I should probably dedicate another video to Byron Katie herself, which I will. And now to kind of come back to I was mentioning a lot of these mystics, so just to kind of go through the entire list. It's a huge list. Nowadays we have as well Adyashanti, we have Rupert Spira, we have Mooji, and all these people, which are modern kind of spiritual teachers, and you could say mystics. So, in Krishnamurti included, they can be confusing because they are speaking from a place of no mind. So they're speaking from the viewpoint of the Tao, of liberation, of freedom. And the quote that I'm going to share from Krishnamurti comes from that same place. So here's the quote. We got to it. The quote is, choice is confusion. Choice is confusion. So I was listening to probably a video from him recently, and this phrase stuck out because it's so confusing, right? It's so weird to say that choice is confusion. Because generally we think, well, I can choose to move my hand, therefore I'm not confused. But what he's pointing at is that when something feels like a choice, it means there are alternatives. Therefore, you're confused. If you were clear, there would be no alternatives. There would be just action. There would be choiceless action. So choice means there's confusion, there's mind. The mind is working with different viewpoints. And usually action coming from choice is actually interference. It's not the best action. It's not the most clean action. It's mental action. It's ego-driven action. So as long as something feels like a choice, it's because your process of the mind working with its different kind of agendas and viewpoints hasn't worked itself out to the end. So the confusion hasn't worked itself out until you arrive at a place where there's no choice. There's just an obvious thing to do. It's like, of course, this is what I'm going to do. There's no choice. So there's nothing wrong with things feeling like a choice. It's just pointing to the fact that when it feels like you could go on a trip or not go, you could be with this person or not be, or you could start this project or not do it. So when it feels like there's a choice, it's because the mind is still working out its cloudiness, its confusion. And you just need to honor that and realize that as long as it still feels like I have to choose, right? I have to cut away. That's what choice really means. It's cutting away options and going in one direction. As long as it feels like that, it's probably going to be reactive. It's going to be interference. And if you just let the process unfold, the mind works with it and thinks about its different viewpoints and sits with the confusion for hours, days, however long it is, you come to a place where it's no longer a choice. It's an obvious answer. And then actually in our spiritual growth process, the more we develop spiritually, the more the mind becomes transparent and gives way to the Tao. And a lot of life is no longer influenced by the mind. Therefore, things don't feel like a choice anymore. Life is very fluid, very natural. So that's kind of what Krishnamurti is pointing at, and that's where he's living from. He's not living from a place of choice anymore. He's living from, you could say, just natural flow.